My name is Robert Henson. I'm 67 years old and I live in Cleveland, Ohio. Last Christmas, I handed my family a lie, and my son handed me the truth I never wanted to see. I'm sitting here now, looking out at the snow covering my front yard, thinking about that morning, December 25th, 2023. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon. The tree lights blinked in the corner. Everything looked like it was supposed to. But I'd made a decision the week before that changed everything. I told my family I'd lost it all. The business, the investments, the security I'd spent 40 years building. I said the market had turned. That bad advice and worse timing had wiped me out. I said I was broke. It was a lie, a test. And before you judge me for it, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered if the people closest to you love you, or just what you can do for them? If you're watching this from somewhere else in the world, drop a comment and tell me where you are. Tell me what time it is, where you're sitting. Because this story, what happened that Christmas morning, it's not just mine. It's a warning. It's about respect, about entitlement, about what happens when you give everything and ask for nothing, and then one day, you find out what that generosity actually bought you. My daughter Sarah showed up that morning with homemade cookies and a sweater she'd knitted herself. She hugged me at the door, told me it didn't matter, told me we'd figure it out together. My son Michael showed up 20 minutes late with his wife and their 2 kids. He was polite, stiff. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, opened a few presents. Then, just before he left, he pulled me aside, said he had something for me, handed me an envelope. I knew what it was the second I felt the weight of it, the stiffness of the paper, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes when he pressed it into my hand. Inside that envelope was everything I needed to know about who my son had become, and it broke my heart in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. Not at 67, not after burying my wife 5 years ago, not after 4 decades of building and losing and rebuilding. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want to hear what was in that envelope and why it mattered so much, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this isn't just a story about one Christmas. It's about what happens when you love people unconditionally and they start putting conditions on loving you back. I'm going to tell you how I built everything from nothing, how I raised 2 kids the same way, gave them the same opportunities, the same help, and how one of them remembered where she came from, and the other one forgot the moment it stopped benefiting him. Before that envelope, I had questions. After it, I had clarity. And what I did next, what I had to do, wasn't revenge. It was something simpler than that. It was respect, the kind you don't ask for, the kind you stop giving to people who've proven they never valued it in the first place. So stay with me. Because what started as a test ended as a lesson, and by the time I'm done, you'll understand why some families are held together by love and others are just held together by money, and what happens when the money walks away. I didn't inherit a dime. I built my business one handshake, one delivery, one 16-hour day at a time, and I thought my son understood what that meant. Let me take you back. 1982. I was 26 years old, married 3 years, and working as a parts runner for an industrial supply company in Akron. I made $11 an hour. My wife Margaret was pregnant with Sarah. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental with avocado green carpet and a furnace that rattled like a diesel engine every time it kicked on. I'd saved $8,000. It had taken me 4 years. One night, I told Margaret I wanted to start my own business. She looked at me across our kitchen table, this scratched-up folding table we'd bought at a yard sale, and she said, "Then we start it." I bought a used Ford F-150 with 140,000 miles on it, painted Henson Industrial Supply on the side panels myself, started making calls. I knew every machine shop, every fabrication plant, every factory floor within 100 miles. I knew what they needed before they did. Bearings, fasteners, pneumatic fittings, safety gear. I drove that truck 6 days a week. I loaded it at 5 a.m. and unloaded it at 9 p.m. I missed Sarah's first steps. I missed her second birthday. I missed Thanksgiving dinners and school plays and anniversary dinners Margaret pretended not to care about. But she never complained. Not once. She understood what we were building. By 1990, I had 3 employees and a small warehouse off Route 8. By 2000, I had 15 employees and contracts with 6 of the largest manufacturers in Northeast Ohio. By 2010, Henson Industrial Supply employed 47 people and cleared $3 million a year in revenue. I retired in 2016, sold the business to a regional conglomerate for $11 million. You heard that right. $11 million. For a company I started with 8,000 and a truck that burned a quart of oil every 200 miles. But here's what people don't understand about that number. It wasn't about the money. It was about what the money represented. Security, legacy, the ability to help my kids build their own lives without the fear and the sleepless nights and the constant weight of wondering if it would all collapse. Margaret passed in 2018. Cancer. She got to see the sale go through, got to see what we built thrive, and she was proud. That mattered more than anything. After she died, after I'd already sold the company, I lived simply. Modest house. Same neighborhood I'd lived in for 30 years. I drove a 2014 Ford F-150, not because I couldn't afford better, but because I didn't need it. I didn't wear expensive watches. I didn't vacation in Europe. I didn't need people to know what I had. I valued respect over recognition. Always had. I thought I'd taught my kids that. I thought Michael understood that the money wasn't the point, that the point was the work, the discipline, the sacrifice, the integrity. I was wrong. And last Christmas, when I told him I'd lost it all, I found out just how wrong I'd been. I gave them both the same foundation. One built a home, the other built a portfolio, and forgot who laid the first brick. Sarah's 41 now. She teaches 7th grade English at a middle school in Toledo, about 2 hours west of me. She's got her mother's patience and her mother's heart. Married to a good man named Tom, who works for the post office. They've got 2 kids. Jamie is 9 and Emma is 7. They live in a 3-bedroom ranch they bought in 2015. I helped with that. Gave her $30,000 for the down payment. She cried when I handed her the check, told me she'd pay me back. I told her I didn't want it back. I told her that's what fathers do. She calls me every Sunday, visits once a month, sometimes twice if her schedule allows it. She remembers my birthday. She remembers the anniversary of Margaret's death. Last Father's Day, she drove out with the kids, and we spent the afternoon in the backyard grilling burgers and playing catch. Simple, easy, the kind of day that doesn't cost anything but means everything. Then there's Michael, 38, commercial real estate agent here in Cleveland. Sharp kid, always has been. Good with numbers, good with people when he wants to be. Married to Diane, a woman I've never quite warmed to, though I've tried. They've got 2 kids, 6 and 4. I paid for Michael's college, same as Sarah's. Ohio State, business degree. He graduated in 2008, right when the economy collapsed, and spent the next 5 years scraping by in various sales jobs, copiers, office equipment, insurance. Tough years, humbling years. I thought they'd teach him something about resilience. In 2013, he got his real estate license, started making decent money. Then in 2017, he came to me with an opportunity, a triplex in Lakewood, 3 units, solid neighborhood, good bones. He needed $250,000 for the down payment and renovations. I gave it to him, not as a loan, as a gift, as an investment in his future, the same way I'd helped Sarah. I wanted both my kids to have security, to have something that generated income, that gave them options, that meant they'd never have to choose between paying the mortgage and fixing the car. That triplex is worth $580,000 now, generates $4,200 a month in rent. Michael cleared over $30,000 in profit last year from it alone, after expenses and taxes. He's never once said thank you, not in so many words, not directly. He'll mention the property in passing. He'll talk about tenants, about market rates, about tax depreciation strategies, but he talks about it like it's something he built, something he earned. Like the $250,000 I gave him was just seed money he was entitled to. He calls me maybe once a month, usually when he's got a question about investments or wants my take on a deal he's considering. We'll talk for 20 minutes. He'll thank me for my time. Then I won't hear from him until the next question comes up. I told myself for years that he was just busy, building his career, raising his kids, that he loved me but didn't know how to show it, that men, especially men in their 30s, don't always make time for their fathers because they're too focused on becoming the men they're supposed to be. I told myself a lot of things, but deep down, I'd started noticing the distance, the transactional nature of our conversations, the way he'd ask about my portfolio but never about my health. And last Christmas, when I tested him, I found out I'd been lying to myself the whole time. My wife told me before she died, "You'll know who really loves you when you can't write checks anymore." I spent 5 years afraid to find out. Then I decided I couldn't die without knowing. Thanksgiving 2023. That's when it crystallized for me. Sarah drove in from Toledo with Tom and the kids. She'd made 2 pies from scratch, pumpkin and apple, Margaret's recipes. The kids helped me set the table. We watched football. We laughed. It was simple and warm and exactly what Thanksgiving's supposed to be. Michael was supposed to come at 2 o'clock. At 1:30, my phone buzzed. A text. "Can't make it. A high-priority client needs to see 3 properties today. Rain check? Sorry, Dad. High-priority client. On Thanksgiving." Sarah saw my face when I read it. She didn't say anything. I just squeezed my shoulder and went back to the kitchen. But I saw something in her eyes. Not surprising. Resignation, like she'd expected it. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my recliner in the dark. The house was too quiet. It's been too quiet since Margaret died. But that night it felt different, heavier. I thought about what she'd said to me in the hospital, 2 weeks before the end. We'd been talking about the kids, about whether I should split everything 50-50 in the will, or adjust for what I'd already given them. She'd taken my hand. Her grip was so weak by then, and she'd said it. That line about knowing who loves you when you can't give anymore. At the time, I'd told her she was being cynical, that our kids loved us, that money didn't factor into it. She just smiled, that sad, knowing smile. She didn't argue. She didn't have the energy, but I could see she didn't believe me. And sitting there in the dark on Thanksgiving night, I realized she'd been trying to warn me. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael's text, the ease of it, the lack of apology that felt real, the way he'd reduced his father to a rain check while prioritizing a stranger's real estate commission. I thought about the triplex, $250,000, the way he talked about it like he'd built it himself. I thought about the months between our phone calls, the conversations that only happened when he needed something, advice on a contract, thoughts on an investment, my take on the commercial market. I thought about Sarah's homemade pies and Michael's silence, Sarah's handmade sweater last Christmas, and Michael's gift card to a restaurant I'd never been to. The pattern had always been there. I'd just been too proud or too afraid to see it clearly. So I made a decision, not out of anger, not even out of hurt, really, out of necessity. I needed to know the truth. I'm 67 years old. I've got maybe 15 good years left if I'm lucky, maybe 20 if I'm blessed. I didn't want to spend them wondering. I didn't want to lie on my deathbed the way Margaret did, knowing something I was too afraid to test. If Michael loved me, truly loved me, the way a son should love his father, then I'd have my answer and I could die in peace. And if he didn't, if all I'd been to him was a bank account and a safety net and a source of capital, then I needed to know that too. While I still had time to decide what to do about it, the plan took shape slowly, over weeks. I'd tell them I'd lost everything, that the life I'd built, the security I'd earned, was gone. Then I'd watch what they did next. I'm not a liar by nature, but sometimes you have to pretend to lose everything to see who stays when the money's gone. I spent the first week of December working out the details. The story had to be believable, specific enough to sound real, vague enough that they wouldn't ask for documentation I couldn't produce. Here's what I settled on. The company that bought Henson Industrial in 2016 had discovered undisclosed liabilities, tax issues, vendor disputes, regulatory problems I'd allegedly hidden during the sale. They'd sued me. The legal fees had drained my savings. The settlement had taken the rest. My retirement accounts were frozen, pending further investigation. I'd had to refinance the house just to cover the attorneys. I was living on Social Security, $1,400 a month. I rehearsed it in front of the bathroom mirror, practiced the right amount of shame in my voice, the right amount of weariness, not too dramatic. Men my age don't fall apart when things go wrong. We get quiet. We get tired. That's what I needed them to see. On December 2nd, I called Sarah. I told her the whole story. I kept my voice steady, told her I was okay, that I'd figure it out, that I just wanted her to know in case I couldn't help out this Christmas the way I usually did. She was quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Then she started crying. "Dad," she said, "Dad, I don't care about Christmas presents. Are you okay? Do you need help? Tom and I can figure something out. We can send you money. I told her no, told her I'd be fine, told her I just needed her to know. She came by that weekend anyway, brought groceries, insisted on filling my freezer, hugged me so tight I felt her shaking. That was the moment I knew, with absolute certainty, that Sarah was real, that her love had never been conditional. On December 5th, I called Michael. Same story, same tone. I got through about half of it before he interrupted. "Wait, how bad is it?" I told him. The frozen accounts, the refinanced house, Social Security, silence, 10 seconds of it. I counted. Then, "Jesus, Dad, I don't even know what to say." His voice had this quality I couldn't quite place. Not a shock, not sympathy, something flatter. "Be more careful. Do you need anything?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just wanted you to know." "Okay, well, let me think about this. Maybe I can help somehow. I'll talk to Diane." We hung up. That was December 5th. I didn't hear from him again until December 24th. 19 days. Not a call, not a text, not a "how are you holding up?" or "let me take you to lunch." Nothing. Sarah called me every single day, twice on weekends, and I knew what Michael's silence meant. I just didn't know yet how it would manifest, what form his absence would take when we were finally face to face, but I knew it would hurt. I knew because Margaret had warned me, and because a father always knows, deep down, when his son sees him as an asset instead of a man. Christmas was coming, and with it, the truth I'd been too afraid to look at for 5 years. I just had to wait and see what my son would hand me when he thought I had nothing left to give. My daughter showed up with groceries. My son showed up on Instagram with a new car. I knew then what Christmas morning would bring. I just didn't know it would hurt that much. December unfolded slowly. Each day felt longer than the last. Sarah called every morning at 8. She'd ask how I slept, whether I needed anything, what I was doing that day. She offered, 4 separate times, to pay my heating bill. She insisted I come to Toledo for Christmas, spend it with her family, where it was warm and full. I told her no. I wanted Christmas at my house, neutral ground. I needed to see how this played out in the place where Margaret and I had raised them, where every room held a memory of who we'd been as a family. On December 10th, Sarah showed up unannounced with 2 bags of groceries, bread, milk, eggs, chicken, vegetables, coffee. She stocked my fridge and my pantry like I was an elderly man who couldn't take care of himself. Maybe I was. She hugged me before she left, whispered, "I love you, Dad. We're going to get through this." Michael didn't call, but I saw him. Online, Facebook, which I barely use but check sometimes just to see the grandkids. December 12th, a post from the parking lot of Morton's Steakhouse. Him and Diane, dressed up, smiling. Caption, "Celebrating another record year." December 15th, a photo of a silver Audi Q5 with a red bow on the hood. Early Christmas present to myself. 2024 is going to be even bigger. December 18th, a staged photo from his office. Him shaking hands with a client in front of a sold sign, 6 figures visible on the contract in the background. 1.2 meters closed today. Grateful and motivated. I stared at that one for a long time. My son had just closed a $1 million deal. He'd leased a $50,000 car. He'd spent $200 on steak. And in the 19 days since I'd told him I was broke, he hadn't called once to see if I was eating. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt something colder, something closer to clarity. Sarah had groceries in her trunk within 48 hours. Michael had champagne in his glass and leather under his hands. On December 24th at 4:47 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Michael, see you tomorrow. Don't worry, I got you something." I sat in my kitchen, staring at that message, read it 5 times, 10 times. "Don't worry, I got you something." There was a cheerfulness to it that felt wrong, a lightness, like everything was normal, like he hadn't just spent 3 weeks ignoring his father who'd supposedly lost everything. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that I'd misread him, that tomorrow he'd show up with something meaningful, something that proved he'd been thinking about me, caring from a distance in his own way. But I knew. The way you know when you're a father and you've been watching your son for 38 years. The way you know when someone's voice changes on the phone, when their eyes don't meet yours, when their love has conditions they've never admitted out loud. I knew what that envelope would be. I just didn't know it would be so cold, so transactional, so perfectly, brutally clear. I sat there until the kitchen got dark, didn't turn on the lights, just sat with my phone in my hand and Margaret's voice in my head. "You'll know who really loves you when you can't write checks anymore." Tomorrow, I'd know. The grandkids were laughing. The coffee was hot. The tree was lit. And I was about to find out if I still had a son. I woke up at 5:30 that morning. Couldn't sleep past that. Made coffee in the dark, watching the snow fall under the streetlights outside my kitchen window. The house smelled like pine from the tree I'd decorated by myself 2 weeks earlier. Margaret used to make me wait until she could help. Now, I just did it alone, on a Tuesday afternoon, with the radio playing carols I'd heard 1,000 times. By 7, I had the coffee brewing and a breakfast casserole in the oven. Margaret's recipe, the one with hash browns and sausage and enough cheese to stop your heart if you weren't careful. I set the table for 8, put out the good plates. Sarah arrived at 8:15 with Tom and the kids. Jamie, her 9-year-old son, ran through the door and wrapped his arms around my waist before I could even say hello. Emma, 7 years old, handed me a drawing she'd made, me and her, holding hands, standing in front of a house. "So you remember you're not alone, Grandpa," she said. I had to turn away for a second, pretend I was checking the casserole. Sarah brought food, a green bean casserole, rolls, a plate of Christmas cookies shaped like stars and trees. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Dad. We're so glad to be here." Tom shook my hand, looked me in the eye. "Good to see you, Bob." They meant it, all of it. Michael showed up at 8:37. I know because I looked at the clock when I heard his car in the driveway. He came alone. No Diane. No kids. Diane's family had obligations, he said when Sarah asked. "And the kids are with her at her parents' place. I'll see them tonight." He was wearing a cashmere sweater and dark jeans that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. His watch caught the light when he set down the single small gift bag he'd brought. One of those glossy bags from a department store, tissue paper poking out the top. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. "Merry Christmas. How was the drive? Did you hit traffic?" The kind of surface conversation you have when the real words are all stuck somewhere deeper. We sat down to eat. The kids talked about what Santa brought them. Sarah served everyone casserole and kept glancing at me with these worried eyes, like she was checking to make sure I was okay. I pushed food around my plate, could barely swallow. My throat felt tight. Tom asked Michael about work. Michael launched into a story about a commercial property he'd just listed. 7,000 square feet, prime location. Already had 2 serious buyers circling. "The market's still strong if you know what you're doing," he said. "If you position things right, you can really clean up." Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She stared at her brother. Michael didn't notice. He was scrolling through his phone under the table. I could see the Zillow app reflected in his eyes. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Didn't say anything, just held on for a few seconds. Michael checked his phone 3 more times during breakfast, typed out a response to something, his thumbs moving fast across the screen. I watched him, studied his face, looking for something. Guilt, maybe. Discomfort. Some sign that he understood what this Christmas meant, that his father was supposedly struggling, and maybe just maybe, that mattered more than whatever message he was sending. I didn't see it. After breakfast, we moved to the living room. The kids played with some toys Sarah had brought. The tree lights blinked red and green. Everything looked exactly like Christmas was supposed to look, but I felt like I was underwater, watching it all through a foot of cold, dark distance. Sarah caught my eye and nodded toward the tree. It was time. She knit me a sweater. I started it months before I told her I was broke. That's when I knew. She didn't love my money. She just loved me. Dad, Sarah said, standing up, I want you to open mine first. She handed me a box wrapped in brown paper, tied with kitchen twine. Simple, the way Margaret used to wrap gifts. No flashy bows, no store-bought gloss, just care and intention. I sat in my chair, the box in my lap, and the room went quiet. Even the kids stopped playing. I untied the twine slowly, unfolded the paper. Inside was a wool sweater, hand-knit, navy blue, my favorite color. I haven't told anyone that in years, but Sarah remembered. I lifted it out of the box. The weight of it, the texture, you could feel the hours in it. The stitches were tight and even. No mistakes. She'd taken her time. A small card was tucked inside, folded in half. I opened it. For the man who kept us warm our whole lives. We've got you now, Dad. Love always, Sarah, Tom, Jamie, and Emma. I looked up. Sarah was crying, smiling, but crying. I started it in October, she said. Before everything happened. I wanted you to have something that would last. Something that mattered. I couldn't speak. I didn't trust my voice. I stood and hugged her. She held on tight, her face pressed against my shoulder, and I felt her shaking just a little. Thank you, I managed. It's perfect. Tom cleared his throat, spoke quietly, the way men do when they're trying not to make a moment bigger than it needs to be, but still want you to know they mean it. Bob, Sarah, and I talked. We know things are tight right now. If you need help with property taxes this year, or utilities or anything, we'd like to cover it. We can't do much, but we can do that. I almost broke. I almost told them right there that I didn't need it, that I'd lied, that I just wanted to see who would stay when they thought I had nothing. But I couldn't. Not yet. That means more than you know, I said. Sarah hugged me again. Jamie came over and hugged my leg. Emma climbed into my lap and touched the sweater, running her small fingers over the stitches. It's soft, Grandpa, she said. It is, I said. Your mama made it with love. I looked across the room at Michael. He was sitting on the couch, one ankle crossed over his knee, watching us. His face was blank, not smiling, not frowning, just watching, like he was observing something that didn't involve him. Sarah sat back down next to Tom, wiping her eyes. She glanced at Michael. Your turn, she said. Her voice had an edge to it I don't think Michael caught. Michael reached down beside the couch and picked up the small gift bag, stood, walked over to where I was sitting. Here you go, Dad, he said. Merry Christmas. He handed it to me. The bag was light, almost empty. I looked inside. There was tissue paper, and underneath it, a thin white envelope, unsealed. No card, no wrapping, just an envelope. I pulled it out slowly, my heart already starting to pound in a way that had nothing to do with hope and everything to do with dread. Sarah was watching. Tom was watching. The kids had gone back to their toys. Michael stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. I opened the envelope, and my world collapsed. I opened the envelope expecting a gift card at best. Instead, my son handed me a bill, demanding I repay the $250,000 I'd given him. On Christmas morning, the paper inside was formal, printed, official letterhead at the top, Henson Property Management LLC, Michael's company. My eyes scanned the page, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Notice of loan default and demand for repayment. Borrower, Robert Henson. Original loan amount, $250,000. Date of loan, March 15, 2017. Purpose, investment capital for property acquisition, 1247 Prospect Avenue, Cleveland, OH. This letter serves as formal notice that the above referenced loan is hereby called due in full. Given the borrower's current financial insolvency and inability to make agreed-upon payments, the full outstanding balance of $250,000 plus accrued interest, 6% annually, totaling $105,000 is due immediately. Total amount due, $355,000 payment. Deadline, January 31st, 2024. I stopped reading. My hand started shaking. Loan. He was calling it a loan. The $250,000 I'd given him, my gift to help him build his future, was now being called a loan, with interest, $355,000. There was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the demand letter. I recognized Michael's handwriting immediately, the same cramped, efficient print he'd used since high school. Dad, I know this seems harsh, but I have to protect my business. When you gave me that money in 2017, we both understood it was a business investment, not a gift. Now that you're in financial trouble, I need to recoup my assets. If you can't pay by January 31st, I'll have to pursue legal action. It's nothing personal, just business. M. Not love, Michael. Not Dad, just M. And he'd called my gift, my $250,000 gift, his asset to recoup. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. Sarah leaned over my shoulder reading. I heard her inhale sharply. Michael. Her voice was low, shaking. What the hell is this? Michael shrugged. Actually shrugged. It's a loan repayment demand. Dad knows that money was always meant to be paid back. Now that he's having financial trouble, I need to protect my interests. Sarah stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor. He gave you that money, she shouted. He handed you $250,000 so you could have a future, as a gift. And now you're calling it a loan? Demanding he pay you back with interest? Sarah, you're being emotional. This is how business works. When Dad gave me that capital, we had an understanding. He's your father! Michael's jaw tightened. And I have a family to support, a business to run. I can't subsidize everyone just because they made poor financial decisions. Subsidize. Sarah's voice cracked. You wouldn't have that building, that business, that life if it weren't for him. And now that he needs help, you're going to sue him? Michael looked at me, not with guilt, not with shame, with something colder. Calculation. I'm sorry, Dad, but I need that money. You understand how business works. He said it like it was reasonable, like I was supposed to nod and agree that yes, of course, a son suing his broke father for a gift makes perfect sense when the numbers demand it. I looked down at the demand letter again, at the deadline, January 31st, 2024, 5 weeks away. He'd written this before he even came over, before he saw my face, before he watched his sister hand me a sweater she'd knit with her own hands. He'd decided I was a debtor, that our relationship was a transaction. I looked up. Michael was checking his phone again. Sarah was crying, her hands balled into fists. Tom had stood up, his face red, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. And I realized, sitting there with my daughter's love in my lap and my son's betrayal in my hands, that I hadn't lost my business in this test. I'd lost something I could never rebuild. My daughter was screaming, my son was scrolling, and I realized I hadn't lost my business. I'd lost something I could never rebuild. I sat there frozen, the demand letter trembling in my hands. Sarah was still standing, her voice rising. How dare you? How dare you do this to him? On Christmas, after everything he's done for you. Sarah, calm down. Michael didn't even look up from his phone. You're being emotional. Emotional? She took a step toward him. Tom reached out, put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. You just threatened to sue our father for money he gave you, and I'm being emotional? Michael sighed, put his phone in his pocket, looked at her with that flat, patient expression he gets when he thinks he's the only one in the room who understands how the world works. Look, he said, I get that this is uncomfortable, but Dad's situation isn't my fault. He made some bad financial decisions, he told me himself, and I can't just write off $250,000 because it's inconvenient for him now. I have a mortgage, property taxes, a family to support. You have plenty of money, Sarah said. I saw your posts, the new car, the steakhouse, the $1 million sale. You're doing fine. That's my money, Sarah. I earned it. With his money, with the building he bought you. He gave me seed capital 6 years ago. I built it into something profitable. That's called investing. That's called business. And investments get repaid. The words hung in the air. Seed capital. investment, repaid, like the $250,000 I'd handed him was a venture capital round, like I was some angel investor he'd pitched instead of his father who wanted him to have security. I finally looked up at him. My hands had stopped shaking. Everything had gone very still inside me. "Michael," I said quietly. He looked at me, waited. "Do you remember why I gave you that money?" He blinked. "You said you wanted to help me build my future. I said I wanted you to have security, to have something that would take care of you and your family. If things ever got hard, I said I didn't want you to struggle the way I did. I called it a gift. I never once mentioned repayment." "Right. But in business, there's always an implied, 'I'm not your business partner, Michael. I'm your father.'" Silence. Sarah made a sound, half sob, half fury. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but I stood. "I need a minute," I said. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, stood there in the dim light filtering through the curtains, my chest tight, my throat burning. I could hear Sarah's voice through the door, still raised. Michael's responses, muffled and calm. I opened my closet, reached up to the top shelf, behind the shoebox full of old tax returns, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a check, prepared weeks ago but dated today, December 25th, 2023. I'd had my lawyer prepare it back in November, the moment I'd decided to run this test. I'd known, or at least hoped, that I'd be giving it to Michael this morning, because even then, I'd wanted to believe. I unfolded it, looked at the amount, took a breath, then I walked back out to the living room, the check in my hand, and faced my son. I spent 6 weeks planning to give my son $2 million. It took me 10 seconds to destroy it, and I've never felt more at peace. I walked back into the living room. Sarah was still standing, her face flushed, her hands shaking. Michael was on the couch, looking at his phone again, that same distant expression on his face, like this was all just an unfortunate inconvenience. Tom was standing by the window, with his hands in his pockets, jaw tight. The kids were in the corner, quiet now, sensing something was wrong. I held up the folded check so Michael could see it. "What's that?" Sarah asked. I didn't answer her. I looked at Michael. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is a check, prepared weeks ago but dated today, December 25th, 2023. Michael looked up. His eyes narrowed slightly. I unfolded it slowly, held it up so he could read the amount. $2 million. Sarah gasped. Actually gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. Michael's face changed. The distance disappeared. His eyes locked on the check, and for the first time all morning, I had his full attention. "Dad," he started. "This was going to be my Christmas gift to you," I said. $2 million. Enough to pay off the triplex mortgage, enough to expand your business, buy more properties, set yourself up for life, enough to never have to worry about money again. Michael stood up. "Dad, I spent weeks planning it, talking to my accountant, my lawyer, figuring out how to structure it so the tax burden wouldn't crush you. I wanted you to have everything I didn't have when I was your age. Security, options, freedom." I paused. But first I needed to know something. Michael's eyes were still on the check. He took a step toward me. "I needed to know," I continued, "if you loved me, or if you loved what I could give you." His face went pale. "So," I lied. The lawsuit, the frozen accounts, the lost savings, all of it was a lie. I didn't lose my business, Michael. I tested you. The room was completely silent. Even the kids had stopped moving. And you failed. I looked down at the check, at Michael's name, at the numbers that represented more than most people see in a lifetime. Then, slowly, methodically, I tore it in half. "Dad, no!" Michael lunged forward. I tore it again, and again, let the pieces fall through my fingers like confetti, scattering across the hardwood floor Margaret and I had refinished 20 years ago. "You thought I was broke," I said, watching the pieces settle. "You thought I'd lost everything, and your response was to demand repayment, with interest, on a gift I gave you 6 years ago, to threaten me with legal action, on Christmas morning. I didn't know. I thought, that's the problem, Michael. You thought I had nothing left to give you, and you still did this. A gift card would have been kinder. Silence would have been kinder, but you handed me a lawsuit. Michael's voice cracked. I can void it. It's not filed yet. I was going to wait and see. Wait and see what? If I could scrape together $355,000? If I'd beg? If I'd remember that I'm the reason you own that building in the first place? I stepped closer to him, looked him in the eye. You showed me who you are, Michael, and I believe you. Dad, please. You don't get the $2 million. You don't get my forgiveness. You don't get the relationship you took for granted for 38 years. You get exactly what you gave me this morning. I let the silence hang for a moment. Nothing. He begged for the check back. Not for a relationship. Not for forgiveness. Just the money. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Michael's face had gone from pale to gray. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Dad, wait. Just wait. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I understand perfectly. No, you don't. I thought you were really broke. I was trying to protect my investment. I have a business to run. I cut him off. My voice was still calm, still quiet, but there was steel in it now. You thought I was broke. Fine. Let's say I believe that. You thought your father had lost everything and was living on Social Security, and your response, your Christmas gift to that man, was to demand he pay you $355,000, to threaten him with a lawsuit, to call the gift that built your entire career a loan that needs to be repaid with interest. Michael's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Even if I was broke, Michael, even if every word I told you was true, you still chose cruelty. You still chose business over blood. Don't stand here now and pretend you didn't understand what you were doing. I can void the demand letter, he said quickly, desperately. It's not filed with the court yet. It was a formality. A formality? Sarah's voice was ice. You gave our father a legal threat as a formality? Michael turned to her, reaching out. Sarah, you don't understand. Don't. She stepped back. Don't you dare try to explain this to me. He looked around the room like he was searching for an ally. Tom was staring at the floor. The kids were watching with wide, confused eyes. He turned back to me. His voice broke. That check, Dad. Please. I can fix this. I'll tear up the demand letter right now. I'll never mention the money again. You'll what, Michael? Pretend you didn't just try to sue your father for a gift? Pretend you didn't spend 6 years treating my generosity like a business transaction you could collect on? He was silent. You called it a loan, I said. You put it in writing. You calculated interest. You set a deadline. You threatened legal action. That's not a misunderstanding, Michael. That's who you are. His face crumpled, not with sadness, with panic, with the sudden crushing realization of what he'd lost. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I'll do better. No. The word hung in the air. You showed me who you are. You showed me what I'm worth to you when you think the money's gone. And I believe you. There's nothing left to fix here, Michael. Please. Merry Christmas. I said it quietly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with finality. Michael stood there for another few seconds, his chest heaving, his eyes red. Then he grabbed his coat from the rack by the door. You're going to regret this, he said. His voice was shaking. You're going to leave. Sarah's voice was hard. Get out of his house. Michael looked at her, then at me, then at the torn pieces of the check scattered across the floor. He turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Silence. Sarah crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. I stood there, holding my daughter, and let myself breathe. My daughter told me I did the right thing. So why did it feel like I'd buried a child twice? Sarah held on tight. I could feel her shaking, or maybe I was shaking. I couldn't tell anymore. You did the right thing, Dad, she whispered. You did the right thing. I nodded against her shoulder. Couldn't speak yet. Tom came over and put his hand on my back. Didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Jamie tugged on my sweater. Sarah's sweater. Grandpa? Where did Uncle Michael go? I looked down at him. His face was worried, confused. He had to leave early, buddy, Sarah said, her voice steadier than I expected. He had somewhere else to be. But we didn't finish opening presents, Emma said. I know, sweetheart. Maybe next time. But we all knew there wouldn't be a next time. We went through the motions after that, opened the rest of the gifts. The kids played with their new toys. Sarah made hot chocolate. We ate Christmas cookies and tried to pretend the morning hadn't split our family in half, but the joy was muted, careful, like we were all walking on glass. By 4 o'clock, Sarah started gathering their things. She hugged me at the door, longer than usual. "Call me if you need anything," she said. "Anything at all. I will. I mean it, Dad. You're not alone." "I know." She looked back at the living room. "The pieces of check are still scattered on the floor. Do you want me to help clean that up?" "No," I said. "I'll do it later." But I didn't. That evening, after they'd driven back to Toledo, I sat in my chair by the tree. The lights blinked red and green in the growing darkness. I didn't turn on any other lights. I picked up the photo of Margaret from the side table, the one from our 40th anniversary, just a few months before she got sick. She was smiling, wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her on our wedding day. "You were right," I whispered to the photo. "You knew. You tried to tell me, and I didn't want to believe you." The house was so quiet. I looked at the floor, at the torn pieces of the check. $2 million, scattered like confetti, like trash, like something that had never mattered at all. I thought about Michael driving home, telling Diane what happened, realizing what he'd lost, trying to figure out how to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I thought about the demand letter, still sitting on the coffee table where I'd dropped it. Business is business. I'd raised him, fed him, paid for his education, given him $250,000, loved him unconditionally for 38 years, and when he thought I had nothing left to give, he'd tried to sue me. Sarah was right. I'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like I'd buried my son? People ask if I regret the test. I don't, but I regret needing one in the first place. The days after Christmas were quiet. Michael didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at my door with an apology or an explanation or even an excuse. Just silence. Sarah called every day, sometimes twice. On January 2nd, I met with my attorney. We reviewed the paperwork from 2017 when I'd given Michael the $250,000. Everything was documented as a gift. No loan agreement, no repayment terms, nothing that would give his demand letter any legal standing. My lawyer assured me Michael's threat was empty. He had no case, but it still stung that he'd tried. On January 15th, I updated my will. Sarah gets the house, the investments, the business proceeds, everything except $1. Michael gets exactly $1. My lawyer says that's the legal way to show intent, to make sure he can't contest it, claim I forgot him. I didn't forget him. I just finally saw him clearly. I don't regret the test. I needed to know. At my age, you can't afford to die with questions like that unanswered, with relationships based on lies you're too afraid to confront. But I do wonder sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the memories are loud, if I failed him, if I gave him too much too easily, if I taught him that money solves problems instead of teaching him how to solve them himself. Maybe I spoiled him. Maybe I didn't. Maybe some people are just wired to see family as transactions, love as leverage, loyalty as something conditional. I don't have all the answers, but I learned 3 lessons from that Christmas morning. 3 things I want you to understand before I close this chapter. 3 truths that cost me a son, but gave me clarity. I gave my son $250,000 before testing his character. Don't make my mistake. Observe the small moments before you bet on the big ones. The first lesson I learned, the one I wish I'd known 40 years ago, is this. Before you give life-changing money, watch how people treat you when you can't give them anything. I ignored the patterns with Michael. I see that now. The phone calls that only came when he needed advice on a deal. The Christmas gifts that felt like afterthoughts. Gift cards, generic bottles of wine. Things you grab at the last minute when obligation requires a gesture but your heart's not in it. The way he'd cancel family dinners for clients but never the other way around. The fact that he never once said, "Dad, you know what? I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you." I saw all of it. I just told myself it didn't mean anything, that he was busy, that he showed love differently. that men in their 30s are focused on building their lives and I shouldn't take it personally. I lied to myself because the truth was too painful to look at. Sarah was different, always had been. She called every Sunday whether I'd given her money that year or not. She showed up on my birthday with homemade cake, not because she wanted something, but because she remembered. When Margaret died, Sarah took a week off work, unpaid, to sit with me in the house and help me sort through her mother's things. She loved me before the money, during the money, and as I found out, when she thought the money was gone. That's the test. That's what you're looking for. So here's my advice. Before you write a big check, run small tests. Delay a payment you usually make and see who gets angry versus who gets concerned. Tell them you're having a tough month. Nothing catastrophic, just tight, and see who offers to help versus who goes silent. Observe who shows up to family events without being asked, who remembers your birthday without a Facebook reminder, who calls to check on you, not to ask you for something. Watch the pattern over years, not months, because here's the thing. You can't buy love, but you can accidentally reward cruelty if you're not careful. I gave Michael everything he asked for because I wanted to be a good father. I thought generosity was love. I thought providing was enough, but generosity without discernment is just enabling. And I enabled a man who saw me as a resource instead of a father. Don't do what I did. Don't wait until you're 67 and sitting with a lawsuit threat on Christmas morning to figure out who your kids really are. Test the small moments. Pay attention to the patterns. Observe how they treat you when you have nothing they want. And then, only then, decide who deserves your generosity, because the right people won't need life-changing money to prove they love you. They'll prove it long before you ever write the check. I never taught my son gratitude because I was afraid asking for it would make me seem petty. Now he's gone, and I realize petty would have been cheaper. The second lesson is harder to admit because it means accepting my own role in what Michael became. I enabled him. Every time he took without saying thank you, I stayed silent. Every time he canceled plans or ignored a birthday or treated me like a consultant instead of a father, I told myself it was fine, that I was being understanding, that I didn't want to be the kind of father who guilted his children into obligation. I thought I was taking the high road. Really, I was just teaching him the wrong lesson. When I gave Michael that $250,000 for the triplex, and he never said, thank you. Not really. Not in a way that felt genuine. I should have said something. Should have pulled him aside and said, son, I need you to understand what this represents. This is 40 years of work. This is your mother and me sacrificing so you'd have options we never had. I'm not asking you to grovel, but I am asking you to acknowledge it. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, told myself it was enough that he was building something with it, and my silence taught him that he deserved it, that he was entitled to it, that my money was just part of the landscape of his life, like air or water, something that would always be there, something he never had to earn or appreciate or protect. When he started treating every interaction like a transaction, I should have confronted him, should have said, Michael, do you understand what you're doing? You're turning our relationship into a business arrangement. But I didn't want to seem petty. I didn't want him to think I was holding the gift over his head. Didn't want to be the kind of father who keeps score. So I accepted it. And every time I did, my silence told him it was okay, that I was an ATM, not a father. Here's what I wish I'd understood earlier. Asking for respect isn't petty. Requiring gratitude isn't manipulation. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's teaching. And when you don't teach your children that generosity requires acknowledgement, that help requires appreciation, that love is a two-way street, you create people who think the world owes them everything, and they owe nothing back. I thought I was being a good father by never saying no, by never asking for anything in return, by making everything easy for him. Turns out, I was just being convenient. If you have adult children, especially if you've been generous with them, don't make my mistake. Don't stay silent when gratitude is absent. Don't pretend it doesn't matter when they take it without acknowledging. Speak up. Set boundaries. Require reciprocity. Not because you're petty, Because you're teaching them how to be human. And silence? Silence just teaches them you don't matter. My daughter didn't need a test to prove she loved me. That's how I knew she passed one I never gave her. The third lesson, the one that gives me peace, is this: the right people don't need tests. Sarah never needed me to pretend I was broke to prove her love. She'd already proven it 1,000 times before that Christmas morning. She'd proven it every Sunday phone call, every homemade birthday cake, every time she drove 2 hours just to have lunch with me, just to sit in my kitchen and talk about nothing important. She'd proven it when Margaret died, and Sarah held my hand through the funeral and didn't leave my side for 3 days afterward, even though her own kids needed her at home. She'd proven it with that navy blue sweater, started in October before I said a word about being broke, before there was any incentive, before there was anything to gain. She knit it because she loves me, not because I can do something for her. That's the difference. The right people show up without incentive. They give without expecting return. They love you at your lowest, not just your highest. And if you're lucky enough to be surrounded by people like Sarah, people who prove their love through presence, through sacrifice, through the small, consistent gestures that don't make headlines but build lifetimes, then you don't need tests. You just need gratitude and reciprocity. But if you're surrounded by people like Michael, people who only call when they need something, who vanish when you can't provide, who treat your generosity like a subscription service they're entitled to, then the test will save you. It'll save you years of wondering, years of hoping they'll change, years of pouring love and money into people who see you as a means to an end instead of the end itself. I spent 5 years after Margaret died, afraid to test Michael because I didn't want to lose him. Turns out I'd already lost him. I just didn't know it yet. The test didn't take my son from me. It just showed me he'd never really been there in the first place. So here's my advice. Invest in the people who've already proven their worth, the ones who show up, the ones who remember, the ones who love you on Tuesday afternoons when nothing special is happening and there's nothing to gain. Don't waste years hoping mercenaries will become family. They won't. And don't punish the good ones by withholding trust, because the bad ones burned you. Sarah didn't deserve my test, but she passed it anyway, because her love was never conditional. Love the ones who loved you first. Protect the ones who protected you. Invest in the relationships that were already real before money ever entered the equation, because at the end of your life, those are the only ones that matter. Those are the only ones that last. A year later, my son still hasn't said sorry, but my daughter still shows up. Turns out, I didn't lose everything. I just finally saw what I had. It's December 2024 now, 1 year since that Christmas morning. Michael never apologized, never called, never sent a letter or showed up at my door or made any attempt to fix what he broke. I've heard through Sarah that his real estate business is struggling, that the market shifted and his over-leveraged properties are costing him more than they're making, that Diane left him 6 months ago, took the kids, and filed for divorce. I don't feel satisfaction hearing that. I don't feel vindicated. I just feel sad. Sad that it took losing everything, his family, his marriage, his stability, for him to maybe, possibly, start understanding what actually matters. But that's his journey now, not mine. Sarah visits twice a month. The grandkids FaceTime me every Wednesday evening. It's our standing date. Jamie tells me about soccer practice. Emma shows me her artwork. We laugh. We talk. We're building something real. I set up college funds for both of them, fully funded. They'll never have to worry about tuition or books or living expenses. That's my legacy now. Not what I leave behind, but who I invest in while I'm still here. I go to their soccer games when I can, sit in the bleachers with Tom, cheer too loud, feel like I'm part of something that matters. This is my family now, smaller than it was, but real, and I've made peace with that. If you're watching this, and you're relating to any part of my story, if you've got a Michael in your life, or if you're worried you might, I'm sorry. It's a lonely pain, a specific kind of grief that people who haven't lived it don't really understand. But I want you to know, you're not alone. Drop a comment and tell me where you're from. Tell me if you've faced something like this. Tell me your story, if you're comfortable sharing it, because we need each other. Men our age, we need to know we're not the only ones navigating these waters. And here's what I want you to do. Update your will. Talk to a lawyer. Be intentional about who you're leaving your legacy to. Don't assume family is family just because blood says so. Make sure your generosity goes to people who've earned it, who've proven they value you, who'll honor what you built. Don't wait for a crisis to figure out who your real family is. Test the waters while you still can. Pay attention to the patterns. Trust what people show you, not what you hope they'll become. And if my story helped you see your own family more clearly, even if it hurt, then maybe this pain meant something. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to an old man's story. God bless you all.